to how men see women and due to how society has set women up, there is no intercourse that can truly be equal. And she talks at one point about a story written by a man, of course, and he writes about a woman who is a feminist and who he believes in his work to be sexually liberated, a feminist, sexually free, not objectified. But the way in which she becomes sexually free is to take ownership of her sexuality, and she sleeps with hundreds of men. She sleeps with whoever she wants, and she orgasms, and she enjoys herself. And Andrea kind of writes how, isn't it interesting that for the man writing that story, the only way for a woman to obtain freedom in his mind was through sexuality, nothing else. And she writes that whilst men find pleasure in sex, they find their freedom elsewhere. But for women, it seems that that freedom is always found through sex, whether the lack thereof, and there's no freedom, and they are in the constraints of a bad situation sexually to a man, or they are someone who takes their sexuality very liberally and sleeps with whoever they want. That's an expression of their freedom, but look, it's still within the scope of sexuality. It's such a fucking interesting book, and basically it's one of those pieces of literature that makes me look at everything and go, oh, it actually is that deep. I started reading the book by Andrea Dworkin to understand more about male rage and to understand more about, I feel like in this current political climate that we're in, it's so in my face, this control over women's bodies in particular, and this like kind of putting women back in their place culture. I really wanted to understand more about it because I never understand why. I just don't understand it. And one of the things that she talks about is how men historically had so much power over women. They had power of estate, they had power of attorney, they had power of finances, everything you can imagine. Women couldn't own anything, they couldn't make money, they couldn't do anything. They were there to serve a man, sexually and at his whim. Rub his feet, hold his babies, wash his dishes, make him dinner, all these things, and that was it, right? And so men held all the power, and women needed to be around men in order to be close to someone who had the power to therefore benefit from it in any small way. And that's pretty basic. We all understand that's just pretty obvious, right? So she talks about this one man who wrote a story where he explains that the reason he felt so much loathing towards his wife was because he acknowledged that she actually had the power in their relationship, because as much as he owned the money and the land and everything else, and as much as he had civil power, sex was something he wanted from her, and he saw her as controlling the sex because she gave it to him. She was the sexual being, she was the object, and he hated this power that she had over him, and he believed that with every fibre of her being, because her being was only sexual, everything she did, every time she moved, every time she breathed, she was flaunting this power that she had over him, and it turned into rage. And any rejection, or even any acceptance of him, was just an ego battle for him, essentially. The story ended in him murdering her, stabbed her like 17 times. But what's interesting is she remarks at the end of that story that actually his wife's death started long before he ever put the knife in her body. It was when he diminished her of her soul and her hopes and her dreams and her personhood and her safety. She was dead long before he killed her. And that's Taylor's oldest time that happens today.